Welcome to Shop Talk Live, Fine Woodworking's bi-weekly podcast. I'm here with Fine Woodworking's Mike Pekovich.
Hey, guys.
Jeff Rose.
Hello.
I'm your host, Ben Strano, and today, very special day, we are joined by Director of Connecticut Valley School of Woodworking, author of over 20 fine woodworking articles, and star of dozens of fine woodworking videos, the incomparable Bob Van Dyke.
Star of videos.
I was trying to figure out what the word would be.
Are we going to edit this?
We pointed a camera at him over 20 times.
Okay. And none of them made any sense.
Yeah, and this is already going really well.
Yeah. If you have questions you'd like us to answer on the show, send them into shoptalk@taunton.com. Any links or articles we mention will be on this episode's show notes page, which can be found at shoptalklive.com. If you're watching on YouTube, please click that thumbs up button. And first off, let's. So I've been on a tear of giving stuff away in the podcast.
Cool.
So about a month or so ago, Megan Fitzpatrick was driving through town, and we had lunch. She was coming back from the Lee Nielsen open house, and we had lunch, and she dropped off a book. She's started her own publishing company. It's Rude Mechanicals Press, I believe. And she's republished Peter Nicholson's Mechanics Companion. And we've got this copy here that's been thumbed through by both Mike Pekovich and Bob Van Dyke. So they've got their stuff on it.
We messed it up.
Yeah. But leave a comment in the show notes page for this episode, and you'll be entered to win that copy of Nicholson's Mechanics Companion. It's a pretty cool book.
And I'm curious, you have a problem with time because it's now October and the Lee Nielsen open house was July, and
Well,
you
who
just said it
knows
was
when
a
I'm gonna-
month. So it all just blends together, doesn't it?
Do you have any idea?
I have no idea what day it is.
I don't even know what season it is most of the
Exactly.
time.
Oh, it's fall, which is terrible because that means the snow's about to start.
And that's when everyone in Connecticut starts complaining.
Exactly. I know. I complain a lot more than just the winter. You should know that.
So, Ben, this book, I'd been sort of vaguely familiar with it because it's been sort of published in a couple different versions. It's a update of an old book, which is in essence kind of a translation-ish thing of an even older book. And do you know the lineage of this?
I don't.
Oh, that sucks.
Well, I mean, this is, I believe that this is a copy of, that was from Chris Schwarz's actual library that she totally went and cleaned up and changed all the, the art type and not changed it, but cleaned it up and made it nicer to look at in today's modern formatting. And it's really as there was very, very few corrections that she had to make. I think there was some misprinting errors or, but yeah, I don't know the ins and outs of it. I'm more the guy who's just giving it away right now.
Well, basically, the person who wrote this book, when was this written? Late 1800s? Basically, he had kind of updated and even
1845.
1845.
Was that early? Oh, I didn't know. I didn't realize.
But
it was that
he
early.
was basically updating a much earlier text. So actually, the lineage of this goes way, way, way back, which is cool.
Well, I think it was based on the Moxon
yes,
mechanics.
Thank you.
Joseph
Yes.
Moxon?
Yeah. Yeah.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, because the stuff that Megan wrote about it, it was based on the Moxon mechanics. What was the name of that book? It was something about
Mechanics
also.
exercises, I
Something
think.
like
Yeah.
that,
I think we
I've
both
got that book at home.
Yeah.
read the first half of the introduction.
Exactly.
No, it's really cool. And it just kind of goes to show that absolutely nothing new has been invented or thought of in woodworking for the last 200 years.
We just have
we've had
quicker
this
ways of
discussion,
doing it.
and I agree totally.
Yes.
You know,
And if you think of it, you're not the first person who's thought of that.
like
So,
how many billions of people have come before you? You really think you did something new?
And ever since the Beatles, there's no new songs, right,
Exactly.
gentlemen? Right? This is like the oldest old man conversation
Exactly.
in the history of Shop Talk Live already.
We got to get away from this real quick.
So I wanted to spring a conversation on the two of you because I realized that I keep notes in my phone of like, hey, we should talk about this on the podcast sometime. And I realized that this is the perfect pairing of hosts to have this conversation with. We get questions from time to time about people who might be scared to take a class or intimidated, thinking, well, my tools aren't up to the task. Maybe I don't have, all of the hand planes I want, or maybe I don't have all of the skills I want. But one thing that somebody said in a while back, they were intimidated to take a class and they wondered what they could do to best prepare for a woodworking class. And that made me think, do you want somebody to come in being capable of building a project? Or do you want somebody coming in more with an open mind and no skills?
That's a good question. We might have two slightly different philosophies because you do offer, sort of a series of basic intro woodworking classes. And for me on my classes, even though we're doing full-on projects, I tend to say there are no prerequisites. We'll get you up and running.
And and in your classes, as long as they have, I don't think we've ever had a complete total beginner in any of your classes. They have some experience, sometimes a lot, sometimes not a lot. But you'll get people that they've never cut dovetails.
Oh, sure.
And, they've never, and, you and I have walked around the shop at the end of the day going, wow, that guy's dovetails are amazing. And he's never touched a dovetail saw, which is cool. I think that's great. But it really depends on the class, that you're doing and what's expected. The problem is if you're doing a more advanced thing, and someone, and you have to go back and explain, okay, this is a table saw, and this is what it does. It makes the whole class go slower, and sometimes I feel bad for some of the more advanced people because they're, it's almost feel like they're wasting their time. The cool thing though with a class where you have different levels of experience is it's actually better because the more experienced people are asking questions that the beginners wouldn't even thought of to ask. They wouldn't have even known to ask that. Mm-hmm. And the beginners are asking questions that the more experienced people are too embarrassed to ask.
Yeah, I could see that. I could see that.
Yeah, and I think that's true. I think it has much more to do with the aptitude, with a certain hand-eye coordination, or is your brain connected to your hands? That's like a really important thing because conceptually woodworking is not that difficult to comprehend. You can get everything, but then to relay that understanding and then get your hands to do what they want to do. So I've had students with no woodworking experience, like this person obviously spent a lot of time working with their hands. I've had people come in whose only background was quilting or ceramics, and they just nail it. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's more there. And actually, in my hand tool chapter of my recently released book, The Why and How of Woodworking.
The book? What?
It is.
Where does one get that?
You can get it on Amazon. But, here's something I just found out. If you want a signed copy of my book, you can go onto my website. That's the only place you can get a signed copy unless you take a class or show up to a demo.
I happened to redo my entire website to make that happen, and it turned out I'm selling them.
Yes.
Yeah.
And another thing I just found out is I made stickers, and I shoved stickers in the book if you get it from my website.
Not hand
I thought
shavings?
I was just special. I thought that there was just 2 stickers on my desk because I'm awesome.
Well, you are.
Okay, thanks.
I didn't get a sticker.
Give it time. Give it time. Okay.
I shoplifted the first book. Oh, look at this.
A sticker just changed hands.
I just got a sticker. Okay, that's cool. but I actually shoplifted the first book.
Yes, you did. I had like sealed boxes of books, went to Bob's, and I thought, no one's going to open these things. And I get a call about, half an hour later. Hey, this is looking pretty good.
And I just told her, I said, okay, this is the first book that you've ever had shoplifted from you. Okay.
So it might as well be me.
I'll sign it.
So to get back on point, the hand tool chapter opens up with the notion that I get asked a lot of times by students, what are the prerequisites for a class? And the answer, always ideally, if you're comfortable with a basic set of hand tools. Can you saw to a straight line? Can you get a chisel sharp and chop to a scribe line? And use a marking gauge. And that's really, really simple stuff. But if you have that down, I think
get through it.
Yeah, you're not going to have a problem at all.
Well, and I mean, I feel the need to. I took that Boggs ladderback class at David D. Yard's, and I, generally, in any room, not many people hang out with woodworking knowledge and greats more than I do, right? I've been known to hang out with some people who know what they're doing, and I was the slow guy in the class. I was the one who was struggling at times because it was a totally different skill set.
Exactly.
For me.
Yeah.
I had never used a spoke shave all day. I had never used the techniques but that's what I'm there to learn.
Yes.
Right? But it was a little embarrassing because it was like, oh, look at fine woodworking guy over there struggling to.
That's pretty
but
cool.
That's what it is sometimes.
Yeah.
I was there to learn, and I was learning all right.
Yeah.
So.
I've taken classes that, here I'm supposed to know what I'm doing and all this stuff, and I'm taking class. I'm like completely lost.
Yes.
It's just talk about feeling like a complete idiot. But you just said it. That's why you're there. That's why if you're an expert in something, then you should be teaching the class, not taking it.
Yeah.
But, the other thing that I've always found, and I've seen this, I've actually been teaching for over 25 years now. It kind of blows my mind.
Wow.
But one of the things that people get out of this is it's a camaraderie. I know people who have made friends. I've made friends with some students over the years. Some of the instructors, some of these, people are my closest friends.
Mm-hmm.
But the students, and then they make friends in a class. I have this one class that, I can count on 3 or 4 people taking that class, because they're buddies and they, they see each other out of the school, and I think that's great.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Should we answer some questions?
Sure.
Because that's gone on.
Are
long
we
enough.
out of time?
What is reality?
All right. First question is from Bill. I've done a large number of glue ups in my day and typically utilize my 8-inch joiner to create a flat 90-degree surface to ensure a good joint for gluing and have never had any issues. I've seen and heard about creating a spring joint to help with the glue up. My question is this: what is the value of creating the spring joint and how to create it? It's a leap of faith to take that perfect edge that you've created on a joiner and create a gap so I would like to understand the value of it. So first off, let's explain a spring joint.
Okay, so a spring joint is, any butt joint is basically what it is. You're gluing up a panel or a top or whatever. It's 2 boards, 90 degrees, and put them together, a straight edge between the 2. The idea of a spring joint is that you're hollowing the center of the joint, not just, and you're doing that gradually, going from the center out to the ends, an equal slope.
So you want about a 1/4-inch gap in the center of the
At
boards?
least 6 inches. Yeah. Well, it's funny because every time I teach this, and the first thing that people do, I put the two boards together. They're on edge, and they put the two boards together, and everyone's head goes down to look at the joint, and they're like,
Well,
"Can
yeah.
I see the ocean through that?" And I was like, "No. I mean, it's depending on the size, it's a couple thousandths of an inch."
Okay. So, so a small gap in the center. And what's the point of that?
The idea is that when you clamp in the center, the ends are tighter than the middle. Okay, so there's two real important things there. One is that in the long run, if as the board dries out, it dries out on the end grain before the center, so it dries through the end of the board like straws. As it dries, it shrinks. So over time, if the end of that board shrinks a little bit, it's still tighter than the rest of it. So mechanically, it's going to stay tighter and it'll stay closed. That's part of it, but I don't think of that as a big part of it, especially using modern glues like Type Bond because they're ridiculously strong.
Yeah.
The main thing is that you can be at your final thickness, okay, and you can line up the board, line up the two boards so that they're completely flush because you have the bottom board on edge, and you put your other one on top, and you have one clamp in the center, and you put a little bit of pressure on it, enough to hold it together. What that's doing is that's holding the ends tight, but the middle is still a little bit of a gap. So you can be pushing one to the other. You can push the top board flush to the bottom board or the other way around, as you are increasing the pressure on the clamp.
So the glue up is not happening all at once, really. You're like traveling down the road and able to veer this way and that way as you're tightening up those clamps.
Yeah, and it's
that
cool
one
because
clamp.
it's kind of fun because you watch the glue squeeze out, and it starts on the ends, and then as you're tightening up the clamp, the glue squeeze out is shooting down to the middle, and then the middle is what finally you get the glue squeezing out there, and it's kind of like mildly entertaining.
Do you make sound effects when that happens? Do you like go
Oh yeah,
as it comes in?
definitely.
Right. Good.
But
Well,
it doesn't take much to
We
entertain.
wrote an article a while back where you actually need about 3,000 pounds per square inch clamping pressure on a glue joint.
On a typical, I think that article was calling for on a 4-foot long glue up, you needed, I don't know, what was it 35, 38 clamps, something like that?
Ideally.
At least that. Yeah. The idea of the spring joint is not to save clamps. Okay, that has nothing to do with it. I mean, it's just, it's a little side benefit. But it's really that you can put, I just did the other day. You'll love it. I was making a coffin. I have to, and in fact, that's what I have to finish this afternoon is this coffin for the Webb Dean Stevens house in Wethersfield.
Oh, okay.
It was for some kid named Henry that died in 1820, and he's finally getting a new coffin. But it was the thing is, it's 20 inches wide at its widest, and my planer is 18 inches wide. So I had to plane both boards to their final thickness and glue them up so that if it was a little bit out of register, it's a couple hits with a hand plane and you're done. It's not like, oh, I can't put this through the planer to its final thickness.
Right.
That's the to me, that's the reason that I do it.
Do you ever use spring joints?
Ideally, yes, but what I definitely want is at least flat. I don't want it, convex at the center. And so what I'll typically do is I'll clamp one board into my vise, and then I'll set the second board just rested on top, lined up, and then I will push the end of the top board and try to pivot it. And if it pivots really easy, it means I'm high in the center.
Okay, so you're pushing the end of the board, and if you're high in the center, it'll pivot.
It'll pivot from the center.
Okay.
If there's a spring or if it's flat, it just sort of kind of scrapes and doesn't really move too much. And with a little bit of a spring joint, you're actually pivoting from the far end of the board. So I'm either looking for sort of scraping flat or a spring joint. I definitely don't want it high in the center.
Okay.
And that's the worst thing. If it pivots, then it's no good, and you have to redo it. I do that in the beginning, the hall table class.
Yeah.
Where we do that, and we're not doing a spring joint by hand, but we're doing a semi-spring joint off of the joiner. And I look at it, go, well, if you don't get a spring off the joiner, at least you got a straight edge, and that's what you're looking for.
Okay,
Going
so
the other way is no good.
I have never thought of a semi-spring joint or, a flat panel glue up being referred to as any sort of a spring. Like, to me, it's either flat or a spring joint. There's a gap in the center, and that's a true spring joint. But if you've got a perfect flat 90-degree surface, you're still considering that kind of a spring joint?
No, that's just flat.
Okay. No, it's flat and straight.
Yeah.
But the spring joint, if you don't, like off the joiner, I learned that technique from, I was reading an article years ago. It was fine woodworking. That's right. And it was an article that Gary Rogowski did years and years ago.
Yeah.
And it was creating a spring joint off of a joiner. And you can do it starting off with light downward pressure at the beginning of the board, heavy downward pressure at the middle, and then lightening it up towards the end. And you're literally deflecting that board as it's going over the cutter head, maybe 1/1000th of an inch, 2/1000ths at the most.
So you might not even see it when you're...
Well, that's why I laugh, because all the students, I demonstrate that, and then I put the two together, and they're all looking for the gap. I was like, you're not going to see that. I'll show them. I'll put like a feeler gauge through it. It's like 2,000th feeler gauge, but you can't see it.
I've only ever seen it done with a hand plane. So,
well, it works. It doesn't work to a point where you only need one clamp and you're really going to be able to push.
Right.
That doesn't do that. It's just insurance is what it is.
All right.
Actually, I learned that technique from you because you covered that in an article you wrote way back. So I've always credited you for doing like the jointer spring joint. Yeah.
No, I got it from Rogowski. Oh. And that's what I love about all of this stuff because it's like you said before, there's nothing new.
No. The joiner trick is not in Mechanic's Companion.
No, it's not in that one. It's not in that one. But all the, you look at stuff and everyone, no one came, look at the thing that I came up with.
Yeah. Except for blue tape.
With the notable exception of blue tape. Which actually, how much do you get a year from 3M for coming up with that?
It's a non-disclosure agreement.
Little kickback there. I'm telling you, I love it because I just did a dovetail class over the weekend, and your name came up, and it was all blue tape, and it's amazing, But for the most part, everyone learns from everyone else, and that's what's cool about this. And the people say, "Oh, I came up with that." No, you didn't.
Yeah.
All right, so one last question about the spring joint. Are there any wood species that you would not do a spring joint with? Like in my head, white oak is going to be harder to spring to draw the joint together than cherry.
Probably, I think it depends on the width of the board and the lengths of the boards. I think every wood is amazingly bendy. Like you'll make these big old clamping calls going across, to get a joint tight across a wide glue up, like a case glue up or something. And it'll be like maple. It'll be 8/4 maple, 4 inches wide. Yeah. And you have some sort of little thing, a little shim or something in the center, and you clamp that down, that whole thing will just go bloop, it'll bend like a spaghetti noodle. It's amazing. So I think where I'm really, really aggressive is if I'm doing drawer bottoms, I have to glue up some pine boards, and it's the end of the build, and I really don't have any more patience. And I'll put a big old honking spring joint at the gap between those pine boards, because that's when I'm just going to throw one clamp on there. That's when I like that. But for like an oak tabletop or something, I don't know. Do you kind of, well, you mentioned like a cherry tabletop, and you work on getting a spring joint there?
I mean, the thing, it depends on the length. I've never done, I mean, this questions talk about a 7 feet long. I've never done a 7 foot long spring joint, but I would. But I wouldn't, but I'd plan on more than one clamp.
Yes.
But the concept and the idea, I was reading last night in Charles Haywood, the woodworker. I was looking up just because I knew that this question was coming. So I wanted to see what he had to say about it. And there really wasn't much. I mean, a little bit. But he did talk at one point about on a longer one, and I was talking to like 1/8 of an inch.
That's a lot of
16th
faith.
to an 1/8. And kind of like, but over, think about it, over a 7 or 8 foot long piece, a 16th, let's say it was a 16th of an inch gap, that's a 32nd on either side. That's nothing.
Yeah.
So, and as far as getting, pulling that together.
Right.
That's a leap of faith, though. Yeah. All right. Well, all right. Next question. We've got a veneering question now. And it is from Mike. I am planning to build a desk out of walnut. The top is going to be approximately 2 foot by 5 foot. I would like to use a double particle board core with veneer on all 6 sides. I do not have a vacuum bag, but I have seen some articles where people used contact adhesive to secure the veneer, similar to securing laminate. What's going on here?
We're counting.
I was counting the sides.
All 6 sides. So 4 inches, the top and the
I
bottom.
just see
Just-
like
just
hands
to make
moving
sure.
in front of me and people
I
smiling
thought it was
at each
2
other.
off, like only 6. What about the other 2 sides?
Yeah, I'm like, did he forget the bottom?
All right. Is this a viable option? As much as I would love to have a vacuum bag, I cannot justify the expense. I do not want to make the top out of solid stock, but I'm a little scared of veneering. Any tips or suggestions? So I want to find out what articles he's reading, because I didn't see any in the only magazine that I know of. Fine Woodworking.
For what?
For
Contact
using
cement?
contact cement
Well,
with veneer.
I mean, any laminate countertop is contact cement.
But
Yeah.
that's plastic laminate. And I know, I mean, I worked for years. My first school was in a commercial shop, and they used plastic. They used for any veneer, they were using contact cement.
Really?
Yeah, but they were also having problems when they used contact cement, and there were more than a couple callbacks and that sort of thing.
Just creeping as opposed to lifting up.
Yeah, both.
Yeah.
Okay, and yeah, real big problems, enough that they finally stopped using it and using contact cement, and bought a vacuum bag and started using a urea formaldehyde glue, like Unibond 800 or something like that.
I did a 2 or 3 page Google search, and like probably 70% of what came up were people on forums being like, I did this, how do I fix it?
Exactly.
And the only other thing that I came up with was a Q&A with, it was on the Joe Woodworker site, so he sells veneering supplies. And his take was there's one big problem with contact cement. It doesn't dry hard.
Yeah.
Wood veneer is just as prone to seasonal movement as regular lumber, and the ability of veneer to expand and contract with seasonal humidity changes is greater than the strength of the contact cement bond. And he goes on to say that he's tried all sorts of different contact cements, and nothing has ever worked except when you're using paper-backed veneer.
Well, that's the thing with the industry has been dealing with this problem for years.
Like the veneering industry? Or-
No, architectural millwork.
Okay.
Because they're trying to use veneers, and I'm not talking small. I'm talking 4x8 type of thing, and they're trying to put these down and using contact cement because that's what they have, and they don't necessarily have guys who are working there who live and breathe working with veneer, so they're not expert at that. And they're trying to use this contact cement, and they have problems. One of the biggest problems is that the solvent for contact cement is lacquer thinner. And then they're shooting lacquer over as a top coat. And the lacquer thinner in the lacquer is going through and
That
lifting
40th of an inch.
Yeah, and it's lifting it. So that's a problem. So paperback veneer, that's a part of an attempt to get rid of that problem. The best one is no black line veneer, and it's something I learned from Steve Latta that this is two thin layers of veneer with a sheet of Mylar in between the two. And so that plastic, not only does it make you just created plywood.
It's really stable, yeah.
It's completely stable, but the plastic is a barrier for the
Cool.
solvent.
What did you call it? No black line?
NBL, no black line.
Is that a brand or?
I don't know if it's a brand. I get it from joewoodworker.com.
Okay.
I know of, you can get it from some plywood dealers, but wholesale plywood dealers, but most of them don't stock it.
Yeah.
And most people can't just call up, a wholesale plywood dealer and get it. So, but no, joewoodworker.com does carry it and carries it in a number of different species.
And you would feel comfortable using that with contact cement? Or more comfortable, should it?
More comfortable. I wouldn't use contact cement for veneer.
Yeah, so let's get off of contact cement if that's not a good idea.
Yeah.
But can we go ahead? So I have this 2x5 table. Can we glue that veneer on without going to a vacuum system? So how would you go about doing that?
I would do it either with a bunch of clamps.
2 foot by 5 foot?
Yeah. It'd be hard.
If without Bob Van Dyke's legendary supply of.
So you have calls going across.
Yeah.
So okay.
You would have those. I'd also be looking at, well, why not do it in solid stock?
I thought you were going to say hammer veneer.
Well, that was also what I was going to say. I was going to talk about that.
That's a myth.
Yeah. No. You can do. I mean, you can do it with clamps, and I know not used to, but still do. But sandbags and that sort of thing are used as clamps, especially on curved surfaces, big curved surfaces, and use sandbags.
Just get a bunch of sandbags and just stack it on there.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the things.
Throw them in the back of your pickup truck come wintertime.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or do all of your veneering in the back of your pickup truck.
Oh.
There you go.
Nice.
But the hammer veneering is one of the techniques that you would be able to do that, and it's just a question of that'd be tricky though.
I was going to
2
say
by
for
5?
really
That'd
large
be hard.
surfaces.
Okay.
Because you have the problem with hammer veneering is it starts getting cold, and you're screwed. So I might take back that using hammer veneer on something that large.
So sandbags.
Yeah, clamping the crap out of it.
So you'd have so you got the veneer, the core, the veneer. You probably have some sort of platen, like 3/4 inch MDF.
At least
Single sheet per side, double.
you want to distribute that pressure as much as you can.
Yeah.
So the thicker the caul, the better it's going to distribute that pressure.
Right.
And then you're going to want to have a bowed caul, some bowed cauls going across.
To get the pressure in the center of the joint as well.
Yeah. So the bowed cauls, can be, cauls that you can just bow on a joiner or by hand.
Right.
Or I saw a couple years ago you could buy them for like $70 a piece. Like that was ludicrous. Or you can take a like you referred to a minute ago, Mike, taking a thick caul and putting a shim, a business card or something in the middle.
We always use up all of the business cards you have in your little rack up front.
Exactly.
They're just all over the place.
I wonder where they go.
You're like, where's the business coming in? Because people are taking all these cards.
I got to replace them constantly.
Jeff and I were just up in Maine and we shot a video with Tim Rousseau, and he did some vacuum veneering. And he had mentioned that you can normally, I'd never thought of this, you can normally find a business in the area, same as you would if you need access to a CNC. You find a professional woodworker who has a vacuum bag and will rent you some time. And I actually did a quick search, and I mean, not using my enormous contacts as a fine woodworking guy, I was able to find a guy, 20 minutes away who that's one of the things he does. He rents out vacuum bag space.
Wow.
So that's something to look into as well.
I don't have one, but if I did, I wouldn't let anybody use that.
Well, it's not like he's giving it to you to bring home to your shop. Okay, no, that's different. But that's I never thought of. That's a really good point, because it's something that I tell my students. I said, you might have a 6-inch joiner or an 8-inch joiner which is fine. Just know who's got a bigger one that you can the once in a while that you need it.
Yeah.
You can go and hit him up for that.
I was at Charlie Durfus, and he was like, "Yeah, the 8-inch joiner works fine because there's a guy with a 16-inch right up the road."
Exactly. Yeah.
All right, so let's talk about our all-time favorite tools of all time for this week. Mike, do you want to go first?
I was trying to think back. Okay, what's the tool that I used most recently? I probably said this before. I'm sure I have. It's my bandsaw. It's, I think
you have a 16-inch.
it's a 17-inch Grizzly. It's just, I don't know. Like if I had to get rid of every single power tool, every single machine, I could only keep one. Plus my hand tools, it would be a bandsaw, hands down.
That's exactly what I did when I sold my house and moved into the condominium. There's a second bedroom that I turned into a shop, and I have my workbench, I have a grinder, and my bandsaw went with me. I got rid of all my other power tools except for the bandsaw.
You have a shop in your home?
Yeah, the cats have their litter box there, and I use it for pretty much nothing.
Because you're at the school every day. I'll talk to you. You'll be like, "I'm at the school. I don't know
Because
why."
you work 18 hours a day.
I'm
Yes.
like, I get home, let's do some woodworking stuff. It's ridiculous.
Do you have anything to add to that?
Nah,
All right.
stupid old bandsaw. What do you have, Bob?
Well, it was funny because I was thinking about that question, and I was like, all right, well, my all-time favorite tool that I use constantly and wouldn't be able to do any woodworking is my number 4 hand plane.
Oh, yeah, I see that with you.
And I have an old Stanley, it was made in 1910 or something, and I use it for everything. I use it to flatten boards. I use it for spring joints. I use it for end grain.
It's like it lives on your bench. You don't even. Yeah.
And it's everything that I could. Once in a while I'll use a block plane, and I use a shoulder plane. Obviously, the number 7 is there to demonstrate to students during hand plane class what a number 7 is, and I have to dust it off because it's like, you know. But yeah, so I couldn't imagine. But I came prepared for this question.
Okay.
Because I had to laugh.
Oh no.
The all-time favorite for this week.
That was a presentation.
This one last summer, you know, doing the Lee Nielsen open house, and I knew that Chris Vesper
That was like a month ago, right?
That was, I think it was like a month. Oh, it was like 2 weeks ago, I think. And Chris Vesper I knew was going to be there, and I had wanted to meet him. And Steve Latta, he was in Australia in June, and he was telling me, I said, "Oh yeah, you got to meet Chris." And I told Chris, I said, "You got to meet Bob." And so I knew he was going to be there. So I was like, "All right." And I was thinking, and Steve said, "Yeah, they gave me this. The students gave him this bevel gauge, and he said it's amazing." And Will Neptune had bought one. I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago at Woodworking in America. And for him to buy a new tool was ridiculous. And he said, he said, it's incredible how good it is. So I'm kind of thinking, all right, well, maybe I'll bite the bullet and buy one. I have absolutely no need for another tool, especially a bevel gauge that, you know, the Stanley bevel gauge I've had for 30 years has worked fine.
Yeah, so you go, I'll take the little one. That can't be too expensive.
Well, I go up there, and it's really pretty. And I put $100 in my wallet, just kind of thinking, I'll probably get this. So I saw Chris, and we're talking and all over the weekend, and I saw him the next day, and we're talking. I said, all right, so let's go on. What are these bevel gauges about? So he's showing me this one and that one and the different woods, and I'm kind of, and I like the small one, and I'm kind of going, all right, and I'm figuring it's probably $110, something like that, you know. Seemed like, all right. And by this time I'm committed. I said, so what are we talking about? And, you know, I couldn't back out.
Sure.
And he goes, "Oh, that one is I think it was like $230." I said, Jesus, are you kidding me? But I was kind of like, all right, no problem. I couldn't back out now. And so I pulled out my $100 bill and then my emergency one that I keep stuck in there just in case.
And then your credit card to top it off.
So I have this really, really nice bevel gauge. It's a $230, and it's really nice. It works amazingly well. And I used it the other day to build the coffin.
Well,
because of the angles on the
paid for itself.
So there you go. This coffin that I'm giving away. But I use this really cool, and I got to say, it's really nice.
They are.
It's amazingly nice.
If you've ever played with the Vesper bevel gauge, it's otherworldly how tight it holds.
I mean, and you push against it, nothing shifts.
Yeah.
And a friend of mine the other day just was showing it to him, and he was taking it apart, and I'm going, no, don't take it apart. And he's kind of like, you better know how to put that thing together, because I know what I'm doing.
No.
I said, all right.
I think that I was going to say, you know, as much as I've ever spent on tools, I've never regretted spending a lot on a tool. And I think I've finally gotten to the point that the more painful the tool purchase is, the less you're going to regret it once you have it. And I think that's exactly right. I have the exact same size, although my inlay is like, I don't know, 10,000-year-old bog oak, and I actually have like the autograph on the blade.
Well, that's extra.
So yes,
that's a lot extra.
So,
I think you just said his is better.
No, I didn't. It's more expensive for no good reason.
Yeah, if it's got the autograph on it, it's like those books that I don't know. I think Mike Pekovich just did a book, and he's writing all over them for people.
Where do you get one of the written on ones?
I don't know.
PekovichWoodworks.com.
And the problem is that he writes all over it, so now you can't return the damn thing.
All right, so my all-time favorite tool of all time for this week is going to be really lame now. It's a router mat.
Oh, you can buy those at a grocery store.
I know.
For half the price.
You actually gave me one a while ago. It was like you were cleaning your shop. You're like, do you have one of these? I was like, no. You just threw it at me. And I was sanding, and I haven't done any serious sanding in like 3 years. Like where it's like, okay, sit down, put the dust mask on.
Right, get to work.
You're sanding for a while.
Yeah.
And I'm building these urns out of this wood that is just an absolute nightmare. And I do not trust a hand plane around it. It just, there's too much on the line here. So fine, I'm going to sand it.
Burial urns?
Yeah. Yeah.
Sort of.
It's a long story.
Do you want to see my coffin that I'm making?
Yeah, I know. There's a theme we're going on here. But, and I'm sanding, with a little 5-inch sander, and it's just on the bench, just rattling and shaking all over the place. I was like, wait a minute, Mike gave me a router mat not long ago, and I put it down. I was like, this is infinitely more pleasurable an experience. It's so stupid. It's just this little cushy mat that you can get at the grocery store for putting dishes
shelf
on.
Liner.
Yeah. And but it absorbs the vibrations a bit, and it holds the piece in place a bit, and it was just like, this is so much nicer to do this not nice task right now.
Yeah.
So go get a router mat, forget you have it, and then one day you'll thank me.
Cool.
And if it doesn't work quite as well as you thought it was going to, spray just a little bit of water on it and just get it a hair damp.
And pre-raise that
it'll
grain.
stick.
I thought you were going to say a little contact cement.
Contact cement would work very good. No, that's what I do with my the tools that have like really, really shiny, smooth handles and high gloss handles and stuff. Tom Lee Nielsen, I thought he was going to kill me one time because he had one of his screwdrivers, and I was using it, and he was right there. I was at an open house, and I couldn't hold it because it was really shiny and smooth. So I planed a couple flats on it, and that didn't quite make it. So I had some spray adhesive. And I just sprayed just a little bit on it.
Just a quick hit.
Just a dabble do.
And it was just enough. And I did the same. Yeah, I thought he was going to kill me. And I did the same thing with my my Lee Nielsen dovetail saw, which is unbelievable saw, but it's too slippery. So a little bit of contacts, a little bit of spray adhesive, just kind of like mist it in the air, and then that's it. And it works really well.
All right, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to answer one more question because we have two on here, but we've been going on a while, so we're going to argue about which one.
This episode of Shop Talk Live is brought to you by Veneering. From furniture and cabinets to floors and crafts, professionals and DIYers alike have trusted the color and protection of Veneering since 1958. Veneering wood stain gives rich, true color in one coat, and Veneering triple thick polyurethane has the durability of 3 coats in one. Visit veneringmasters.com for details.
This February, experience the joy of hands-on learning with masterclasses in craft at Fine Woodworking's first ever hands-on event. Taking place at the Florida School of Woodwork, February 1st, this 3-day event is a unique opportunity to expand your skills through personalized instruction from a diverse group of experts. We have Michael Fortune, Kelly Parker, Peter Galbert, Mary May, Dixie Biggs, Jennifer Anderson, Michael Cullen, and Dave Fisher. Of course, there will be some social time between the days of hard work, where you'll be able to taste some regional flavors with local food trucks and locally brewed beer. But this event is really all about making and doing, all in an intimate setting. The class sizes are small. That's great for learning, but it means space is limited. So don't wait. Register now and come see us in Tampa.
All right, we're back. Last question. This one is from Dave. I recently made a box using hidden splines because I had heard they were strong. Sure enough, they seem kind of strong, but I'm wondering where that strength comes from. There's no long grain to long grain joint here. At best, it's 45 degree short grain to long grain. Not hugely better than the two 45 degree surfaces on the miter itself. Or is it the one long grain surface enough to give it this strength? Or am I being dumb and missing something obvious? It's not a dumb question
We won't
unless there's
say-
something obvious.
We
No,
won't
it's-
say
it's a good
dumb.
question.
No.
Mike, you
Well, okay, so we're talking about the hidden spline, meaning it's running vertically within the miter, but it's short grain, so the grain is running across the joint.
on the you've got a miter there. You've got the
You've got you've got a 45 degree miter on two pieces.
On flat.
You generally route a groove
yeah.
in that miter and then put a piece of wood
Yeah.
to reinforce it in between. And that groove is routed at 45 degrees.
Sure, and then make sure, and if you can do it on the table saw if you want it sticking out both ends.
And it's
Or-
it's
yeah.
90 degrees. It's 90 degrees to the face of the joint.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so the wood goes in, but the grain of the spline is not long along its length. It's kind of short going across.
So it
Yeah.
would be like say 8 inches wide and half an inch long.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So a
Yes.
long cross cut
Yes.
of grain because I think I have done this in the past the other
So-
way, and that's
Yeah,
not as
and-
smart.
That's adding an incredible amount of reinforcement. I mean, first you have a ton more glue surface there.
Yeah.
And then you're creating that cross grain strength with the spline going
Well, it's a
across.
mechanical thing.
Yeah.
You know, you're getting that huge mechanical advantage rather than just the two surfaces.
Right. Yeah, because in essence, it's going in at a 45 degree angle to the faces of the box. So if you tried to, say, pull the faces of the box away from each other, that 45 degree splines are actually, like you said, mechanically, it's almost like a big dovetail holding
Or
that thing
tenon.
together.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
It's mechanical, so it's going to make it so that trying to break that glue joint, you've got to move it first, and to move that glue joint means that that mechanical thing has to fail.
right.
I think, okay.
So that's huge. Plus, you've got long grain on this spline. And you're not growing right to end grain. It's at an angle, so it's like 45 degrees. So if you think of taking a plastic straw and cutting that at 45 degrees, and so there's a long surface. Even though it's the end of the straw, it's much longer than.
Are you
just
following that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's halfway between a face joint
Exactly.
and a butt joint.
Okay,
But that
yeah.
spline is 100%, that's a face joint.
Exactly,
So you
100%
have-
long grain.
In essence, double the strength there than just that mating 45 you would in the regular miter.
The other thing is glue. A glued miter is way stronger than people give it credit for. I mean, it really is. You look at a piece of period furniture, a bracket foot, OG bracket foot. Typically, those are just glued. A glued miter joint.
Are those end grain? I always thought they
It's-
would be long grain.
No, it would be exactly what we're describing here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. And to make them stronger, they are, splined.
Or glue block glued to in
Or
the
a
inside
glue
corner.
block on
Yeah.
the inside, but lots of them are just there, and it's amazing how strong that is if you have a good mating surfaces.
Right.
That's key.
Right. So in a box, if your 45s aren't really clean, and maybe, if anything, I shoot for touching on the outside corner, if there's any
Yeah.
gap, it's slightly on the inside, that's a really weak miter joint,
Yeah.
unless you really nail the 45 and have the glue surface all the way across.
Right.
Yeah.
I also took a page from our friend Matt Kenny's book, and last set of boxes I did, I sized them beforehand, and I feel the strength from the glue sizing that just keeps the glue from being absorbed into the end grain as
That's the
quickly.
thing. Yeah,
Yeah.
because you're putting glue in the end of straws.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I was doing a miter box it was a commission. The husband was commissioning a jewelry box for his wife. And I'm doing miter corners because miters are really, really strong. So I think I had this box was already glued up and I was taking it somewhere. I accidentally dropped it and pop, all 4 pieces popped. Like that thing just like exploded. So I said, ever since then, I've never trusted an unreinforced miter joint. And I'm guessing, I'm going to err on the side of getting really tight on the outside, which would explain probably why it popped. But I always tend to reinforce them after the fact with the spline going across the joint.
Oh, it's definitely better, but it's surprising how strong the miter joint by itself, if it's done well.
If it's done correctly.
Yeah. I mean, I watched Phil Lowe years ago. I mean, and he was planing, with his number 4 plane, not a, it's all end grain, and he's planing this joint, and it was perfect. I mean, and it was just a rub joint.
Yes.
And it was amazing how good it was. And I kind of look at that and go, okay, I can do that one day. And, and practice it. And you can do it.
So for selfish reasons, I'm going to change the subject a little bit. If you're putting splines across the miter joint, which I need to do,
Yeah.
The long way?
Well, no. If you got it
outside.
glued up and you're going to put splines like going over the table saw to put a groove in. Barry and I have discussed this where he argues that doing really, really thin hand-sawn splines with veneer is just as strong as like an 1/8 inch spline. Because he argues that, sorry, I'm throwing him under the bus right now, but he argues that it's all about the surface area of the glue joint as opposed to the size of the spline. So I need to do these splines. I'd rather do veneer because I want them to be thin and not noticeable.
You're going to notice it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anytime you're going across the grain, you're cutting across those fibers, so you're going to see it. You can't not see it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then I use it as a design feature.
Yeah.
And so I go 1/8 inch with the flat top kerf. You can do the handsaw with the veneer, and I've done it in the past. The problem I had is that your eye is really good at seeing if things are parallel or not parallel. And if your saw curves are off just a hair, it looks like crap. So the one time I did it, I really exaggerated the angles at a maple box, really off angles for all the splines, glued in, ebony splines. And it looked kind of cool because it almost looked like sutures, like sewing up the corners.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I guess you just make yourself a sawing guide. I thought, I wouldn't do that because I couldn't saw straight. But then I think I saw on Instagram someone had this cool little jig you clamp on and you saw really straight. And I thought, oh, that's really smart.
But the strength difference, you don't think there's...
I think it's one of those things where if there is a difference, it's not enough to worry about.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I was going to say the 1/8 inch spline is going to be stronger than a piece of veneer, but even trying to get, I mean, if you're talking commercial veneer, even 32nd of an inch veneer, which is hard to get now, trying to put that into a saw kerf is tricky because that yellow glue swells
Softens
it
it.
instantly.
Yeah,
That's how I make dovetail repairs. That's how I get rid of gaps on a dovetail, is to make a saw kerf with my dovetail saw, take a piece of, I'll actually make a piece of veneer,
Right.
and hit it and compress it with a hammer on an anvil. And it's something I learned in the Tay Frid, early Tay Frid books. He used to write for Fine Woodworking.
Who?
Exactly. That's where I learned everything, was those early Fine Woodworking magazines. But he, and you take that piece of veneer and you compress it with a hammer, and when it goes into that kerf easily, then you use yellow glue real fast. Yellow glue, stick it in there, and that's it. You don't have time to screw around with it because it swells instantly. 1/8" piece of you can tap that in with a hammer and it's
Right.
a piece of
Yeah.
cake.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a really good point. I think that's where strength is the biggest issue. Is if you have a little thin veneer and it starts to bind, it's going to buckle and snap before
Yeah.
it fully seats,
Yeah.
and then you can't get that other half out of there. So I think that's the main strength issue. That's a really good
Yeah.
point.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Let's hit some listener comments via email from Pashun. This one, let's see. Mike, 2 professional dowel jigs are the Dowelmax and the Jessam. They are arguably more accurate than the Domino. I have owned and used all 3. For panel alignment, they are great.
Why is this directed at me?
I don't know.
I feel like I'm being put on the spot here.
And I didn't know what it was talking about, so I was like, "Oh, good, it says Mike."
All right, and here's a good one. Let's see. This
Two
one,
different things. A dowel and a domino are 2 different things. And I have a really nice dowel jig. It's the Dowlet.
the Dowlet.
Yeah.
Dowlet
I
Pro.
think that's the one that's been around for a million
Exactly.
years.
With
Yeah.
the crank handle
That's the
inside.
same
and
one
the
I
place.
have. Yeah.
All right, and then on iTunes we have a 5-star review from Just Say No 12345. Best podcast for woodworking. Funny that I just finished a queen bed that only took me 18 years to finish, and when I actually finished it, the whole headboard was lost by the thick mattress and box spring and pillows.
Oh, no.
Exactly like the last podcast.
And what's also interesting is he's only 20 years old.
This podcast gives an unpretentious assessment of all the mistakes you will ever make and has great suggestions and encouragement. Thank you.
Right on.
All right. Anybody have any recommendations? I have one.
On that,
No, just in general, next time you're drilling something with a hand drill, use low speed. Enjoy yourself. My drill was on the low speed the other day, and it was actually like, I'm just going to stay here and just take my time and just like, this is nice. Just slow down and enjoy yourself.
and take 18 years to do it.
Whatever. I'm not going anywhere. All right. Anybody else? Nope. Going once. All right. Outro. I don't know why I read the part that says outro on my script. And I just crossed it out too. That's all for this episode of Shop Talk Live. We'd like to thank our sponsor for this episode, Veneering. If you have any questions you'd like us to answer on the show, send them into shoptalk@taunton.com. If you're watching on YouTube, please click that thumbs up button. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode. Thanks for listening. Thanks for being here, Bob.
Thank you.
Yeah,
It was
thanks,
a lot
Bob.
of fun. Thanks.
Boom. Tacos.
Did we do it right?
We haven't yet, so it was.
All right. Oh, are we gonna have a fight? Oh, good.
Well, no, but
I was like, oh, Mike, you're full of
Hi, I'm Tom McLaughlin, host of Rough Cut with Fine Woodworking, sponsored in part by Felder Group. Season 8 is now airing on PBS and brings unusual, unique design inspiration and easy-to-follow project instruction to woodworkers at every skill level. Check your local listings or visit finewoodworking.tv to watch right now.